Hey guys, Mr. Mac here with another art lesson. We're going to try and make some marbles today and make it look like they're a bit shiny and glowy using some watercolors and some other techniques. I'm going to break it all down for you. It's not as hard as it looks. Let's get into it. I'm using watercolors to get the effect today. You could probably do this with felt tips or color pencils or watercolor pencils if you wanted to, or even just other types of paint. But I'm going to show you how to do it with watercolor, and I think it is probably the easiest way of doing it. You're going to need a pencil, you're going to need something to paint with. I've grabbed a glue stick here. You're going to need both the glue stick and also I'm going to draw around the lid later to get my marble shape, so it's quite a handy secondary feature of that glue. You're going to need some white paint, or at least it would be useful to have some extra white paint to add the little highlights at the end. That was just white acrylic and a little brush to go with it. Going to need some card to work on, some scissors, and also I've got some black chalk and some white chalk and a little bit of paper there, tissue paper, to blend them with, which you'll see a little bit more of in a second. So you can see I've started off by clearing my workspace. I've grabbed my circle shape to draw around, which is just the glue lid. Don't forget to put it back on at the end. It doesn't really matter what size circle you draw around. It's just easier. You can draw them by hand if you want, but you'll get a better shape if you draw around something circular. Then I've grabbed my little water brush. It's just a plastic brush that's got water in it, but feel free to just use a regular brush and have a little water pot next to you. So we need to have a bit of a think about color choices here. We're going to try and use what's called analogous colors or analogous colors, which basically just means colors that are near each other on the color wheel. You can see I opted for a purple there to start with, and then I could have gone either way. I could have gone towards the blue or towards the red. I've gone towards the red, so I've grabbed some reds, and then because I've grabbed red, I then opened up the option of going into oranges and yellows, which I've done. Obviously, I need to be careful there not to mix the purple up with the orange or yellow, because purple and yellow are opposite colours, and they'll get muddy if they get mixed together. But if you're careful, you can go that far as 3 or 4 colours apart. The middle one, I've just gone for some shades of green and yellow, and then on the end one, I've gone for a slightly different design, some little wiggly shapes, and I've gone for shades of blue and green. Okay, so all right next to each other on the color wheel, just keeping it nice and simple on our color choices, these analogous colors. And now we need to start thinking about the light direction on the marbles. So I've chosen the light to be shining from the top right hand corner, because that's going to dictate where our highlights go on our marbles, where our shadows go on our marbles, and also where the shading on the marbles is going to end up. So because the light is coming from the top right, it means that the bottom left edge of the marble is going to be in shade. So it's going to be darker than the rest of the marble. So we're going to grab our black chalk at this point, and we're just going to put a little curvy line on that back edge that's opposite the light, just about a third of the way around. It doesn't have to be the whole thing. Add a little bit of extra chalk on there, and then we're going to grab some kind of device to now smudge that. It doesn't matter if you go over the lines a bit, because we're going to cut these out in a minute and trim them up to make them nice and neat again. So I'm using a little paper blending stick. It's basically just lots of rolled up paper really tightly together. You can buy them in art and craft shops. But you could just use a tissue. You could even just use your finger for this. This little blending stick just gives me a bit more control, because you can sharpen them, because it's got a bit of a point to it. So you can see what I'm doing. I'm just adding a little bit of chalk there, blowing away the excess, and then using my little stick, or you can use your finger or your tissue, to just try and blend that out so it's got a smoother edge. You see how basically it's taken up about a third of each of those marbles, hasn't it? And you could do a little bit less if you don't want the shadow to be quite so dark, or you could even do a little bit more. I've also added a tiny little extra shadow on the front edge, the leading edge, where the light's coming in. We'll see why in a minute, but it should just help add to the effect. Then we need to cut them out. As with any time you cut anything out, make your life easy, yeah? Cut them out into some smaller bits first before you start trying to cut these circles out. It's going to make our life a lot easier in a second. So we can see it's a little bit messy around the edges. So to tidy that up, we're just going to really neatly cut it out. I like to use the very end of the scissors, the bit closest to your fingers, and rotate the paper when I'm cutting a circle like that, rather than rotating the scissors. And then we can arrange them on our second sheet of paper. or card, and get them stuck down wherever you like, really. I've gone for two sort of nearish and one a little bit further away, but do whatever you think looks good. You just want to leave a bit of a gap between them for the shadows. And please do make sure they are all the same way round that we had them before. You can see all the shadows are going to be on the bottom left, coming out of that dark section that we just shaded in, and the highlights are going to be on the top right of them, okay? So I'm going to put a pencil mark on the very bottom of each circle and on the left side of each circle, as if it was a clock. So the number 6 and the number 9, if that circle was a clock, on the outside of them. And those are where the starts of the shadows are going to come out. And you're just going to have to freehand this bit. You're not going to be able to draw around anything. Just going to draw a little oval shape going in the direction of the light that we talked about earlier, connecting those two lines together. Don't worry if that doesn't quite make sense yet. You'll see when I colour them in, the shape will be a bit clearer. They're basically just a long, thin circle that's sort of been stretched out. A nice long oval shape. It's about twice as long as the marble, about the same width, maybe a little bit thinner. And then all we're going to do with those shadows is use the same colours that we used on the marble to colour them in fairly randomly, to be honest. You want to keep it fairly light and bright, so plenty of water on your brush, not too much paint. The more water you use and the less paint you use, the more the colours will sort of naturally blend together anyway, which is always quite a nice effect. If the colours are not coming out as bright as you would like, put a layer down of the watercolours, let it dry, or grab a hairdryer. Hairdryer is pretty useful for this technique anyway. Whenever you're using watercolours, quick hairdryer over it and you can start working over it again when the colours are dry. Same goes for when we added the black chalk earlier. Obviously you have to wait for it all to be dry before you can do that. Now you could stop there and it does look quite nice, but I'm just going to add a little black shadow underneath my marbles just to sort of try and elevate the effect even further. So as an optional step, I'm going to grab my smudge stick again, my little paper stick, and just try and blend out a little bit of that black chalk to create a bit more depth, a bit more of a 3D effect on these marbles. Use it sparingly, the black chalk. You really don't want to go too heavy on it. The more you use, the less bright your colours are going to be. It's really going to muddy them down a lot. So just a little bit of black on there. Blend it out as smoothly as you can. You don't really want to see black lines. You want to see nice blended soft edges if you can. So out of the three I've done here, you can see probably the green one was the best because I used the least black. Probably was a little bit too heavy-handed with it on the other ones, but there you go. That's just how it goes sometimes. I grabbed the white chalk at this point just to see if it would show up. It does add a nice little extra glow, so it's an optional thing you could try here. Where the light hits the marbles, you want to make that a little bit lighter, add that glow in, and then also I just wanted to brighten up the shadows a little bit so they didn't get too dark. And now time for the final step. This is easily my favorite part of any glass or 3D shiny painting like this. We get to add the reflections, which is really going to make your marbles pop. So a very small amount of paint on a nice thin brush. Little thin lines, try and curve them with the same curve as the marble. And don't overdo it, don't add too much. You can go lines, you can do little spots like I've done on this red one, and just a few little bits. And then step back and look at it before you add any more. You don't want to overdo it. So there we go. They're looking pretty good, I think. Let me know if you try this. Send it to me in the normal ways. I'd love to see them. Stay safe, everyone, and I'll see you soon.